First, let me talk about the younger you and the art world at that time. What was the scene like? How would you put yourself out there? What were your ambitions at that point?
When I started, there weren't cell phones, right? So think of a world without cell phones. And so it was very different, and things were word of mouth. Like there was no internet to research things. So you're hearing things from your professors, you're hearing things from, okay, and there was, I was in New York, and there was I guess the rule was, I kept hearing was it's 6 years of networking in New York to get picked up by a gallery.
How would you put yourself out there? Like did you make any like underground scenes, or like was this alternative spaces, anything that you tried before?
I mean, I was working full-time as a surface pattern designer, so I was working full-time as a surface pattern designer, and then I was painting, so I needed a studio.
What specifically in that time, what would be, if you were to attribute 3 things that you were doing right that brought you to, let's say, anyone who's actively looking for a gallery representative, what would that be?
So you have to be willing to network. You have to be talking to people and meeting other artists. You have to be looking at other people's art and hanging out with other artists.
Welcome to the Arts to Hearts podcast. Kathleen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I feel like I should be saying long-time listener, first-time caller.
Wow. I mean, it's like I was saying before we started, this is like, I'm not going to, a lot of times when, you record or I'm speaking to a guest and I have to I have to set context. I have to tell them, oh, this is what I believe. But in this conversation, I feel like I'm just going to pick up where like from different points of the podcast, because, we both have been, as a listener, you've been listening for, as someone on the podcast, I've also been sharing. First, let's talk about you. What brought you into the arts?
I think I realized very early on that it was a way for me to communicate with people. And I found a home. Honestly, it was in high school. Like I found a home and a place where I fit in, and a community there, and a way to get positive attention and just a sense of belonging. And I was good at it. So it was like, okay, this all fits. I can do this. So that was it.
Did you have any of those? Did you ever have anyone around you that was an artist at that point that made it like, okay, you could do this for yourself as well?
No, not at all. So my parents were very supportive, and I went to RISD pre-college. And once they knew that this was what I wanted to do, it was, okay, let's get you art lessons. They were very supportive. But we weren't a family that grew up going to museums. So I think for me,
What was the first time you did?
first time I went to a museum, I was in college, and my professor brought us to the Met.
This is, I also did. In India, we don't have a culture of going to museums. In fact, we don't have a lot of popular museums. It's not a tradition. And I went to a museum, I think you won't believe. My first museum that I went to, that was for fine arts, was actually Louvre. I never thought that could be like, this was something.
Yeah, it just wasn't part of our life. I mean, my mother had art in the house, but it just wasn't a thing that we went to museums. And one of my first jobs was working at a library and opening the art books. It was like, whoa, like it just was this whole opening into a much bigger world. And that to me, I mean, just the library and the books were just life-changing.
If you wouldn't be an artist, what do you think? What else would you be?
I was good at math. So when I started college, I was going to be a math major. And then I went in, and I can remember I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, I ended up being a couple of years ahead in math. And so when I went to college, I walked in and I was the only freshman and everybody was juniors. And I called my parents and I'm like, I can't do this again. Like, I can't be the young, weird kid that does art and math. So I did it all throughout high school, and I'm just going for art. So that I changed and went to a completely fine art degree and left my math behind. But I think I would have done something with math.
Wow, that's like two poles.
There's a certain kind of brain. I mean, I think that there are, if you've ever read Temple Grandin and she gets into, autistic brains or neurodivergent brains where there's a linking between visual thinkers and math. So there is a certain type of brain that works like that. So I think there is a path.
So today's what do you think about the art scene right now? What is your opinion about being an artist actually in today's age? Do you think it's easy or difficult as compared to like other times? What let's talk about it. Is this the best time to be an artist? How long have you been painting?
So I don't think there's ever a bad time to be an artist. And I think there are many different lanes in the art world, and there are many different ways to be an artist. And I think it's one of those really wonderful things that you get to decide, you get to frame your beliefs, right? You get to frame what you want to do in this world and what your career is going to look like. And while that can be overwhelming, I think it's a huge gift. If you get overwhelmed, then that's time for you to sit down and readjust what that means to you and what your path is. So you're in complete control over all of that and setting all of those expectations. So I think that's wonderful, right? Like we're at a time when there's basically any type of art, there's a platform for every single type of art out there. And you can find your audience. And I think it's just a fantastic time for the art world. And it's a fantastic time to connect with people. And there are no rules. It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
How long did you start painting?
I've been painting mostly my whole life. I mean, I went to, I was painting in high school. I went to art school. I've been painting ever since. I did take out of art school, I signed with a gallery, and then I left that scene. And for 13 or 14 years, my kids were my priority, but I still painted. I just wasn't, correct. And what I didn't realize at the time, going back, if I could tell anybody that's going through that, I mean, I talked to artists that had kids and I just didn't have the bandwidth to sit there and, I need like a 4-hour window. And for me, for my type of work, it's very deep. It's like I need that RAM space in my head to be thinking deeply about my work and all the levels of the work. And I couldn't do that. So I did these for 13 or 14 years. I still painted, but I did drills. So then when I had that computer space and I went back, I was like, whoa, like, okay, I apparently got better. So
How do you think at that point? I also want to like just set in context to the same question I asked. Why I'm asking you this is you push yourself out there in two different times, two different art worlds actually, because the art world we know today is very different from what the art world was, let's say 20 years ago. And first, let's talk about your experience, and of course, but then I'm sure you were much younger and now you're more mature, and I think with that maturity it also comes like better judgment. I'm assuming, I don't know what will happen, but better judgment, I think, I don't know, more patience, also not seeking enough validation. First, let me talk about the younger you and the art world at that time. What was the scene like? How would you put yourself out there? What were your ambitions at that point?
when I started, there weren't cell phones, right? So think of a world without cell phones. And so it was very different and things were word of mouth. Like there was no internet to research things. So you're hearing things from your professors, you're hearing things from, okay, and there was, I was in New York and there was I guess the rule was, I kept hearing was it's 6 years of networking in New York to get picked up by a gallery. So
Years of networking.
6 years of networking.
And how do you define this networking? What do you think? What would you do? Or
Going to openings, making your work, just, supporting other artists, just being around the scene.
you would go, let's break it down. You would go to like gallery openings, exhibitions,
Open studio tours.
open studio tours.
Yes. And that's what you're doing.
Would you put yourself like, how would you put yourself out there? Like if you were, did you make any like underground scenes, or like it was this alternative spaces, anything that you tried before all of that?
I mean, I was working full time as a surface pattern designer. So I was working full time as a surface pattern designer, and then I was painting, and so I needed a studio. So you find studio shares, and I would sublet studios. And at one point, I went to I I saw an ad for a studio share, and it was at a residency program for international artists, and a fairly prestigious one. And I said to them, instead of whenever you have gaps between artists coming, because like visas would get, I'm like, I will be your full-time studio like rat, and I will move from studio to studio. And rather than you placing an ad, I'm just here permanent, like I'm here long term. This, I get a reduced rent and I go from place to place. And so from being in that program, I mean, I'm working full time. So I'm going there after work, and, I'm on a tight budget. So my dinner was like a slice of pizza and a meatball and a glass of water. Like it was, you know,
How does it feel like now, or apart from that, 20 years later with all of that food?
yeah, yeah, my stomach can't, I mean, still do some of that, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we all have been through that.
Yeah. So you're looking for the openings, like which openings have the good cheese. So
We've all been through that too. And a lot of, so in India, you, let's say, a lot of, this is like something that I know everybody does. I don't know here in the US, but often may not say it out loud for people who drink specifically, because openings have wine and alcohol, and a lot of artists are generally, they're struggling to make ends meet. So this was also one way to have like a fine food or like cheese and wine, and like feel that feel without spending the money.
yes, yeah, yeah. We would joke, we're the Midwestern girls that are like putting the carrot sticks in our pockets. Like we go to New York with empty suitcases. Um, So I have, my friends were dancers, and I had a couple of friends that worked in ad agencies. So they would get us into the really swanky parties. That was fun. And that was the 20s. But I think for the art, it was really being in a shared studio and meeting the other artists. And then some of the older artists like took pity on me. They were like, "Oh, you poor thing, moving from studio to studio." And they actually helped me find, at the time I got a job at SUNY Empire State College in a program that's now defunct, and they had a studio in the middle of Chelsea. And I applied there. I got in there for grad school, and I ended up running their visiting artist program. So I could reach out. I had a budget. I could invite any of the artists to come and talk to all the students. And the students were coming from all the other SUNY universities, which SUNY is the State University of New York. So they would come to Manhattan for a semester and get a studio in Chelsea, and then we would arrange studio visits for them. And it was such a great program that we actually had people that had MBAs from Columbia, NYU, and Columbia and NYU. Yeah, pretty much Columbia and NYU. It was like this underground program that people were coming. And so it was underground enough that the people at the residency were like, you need to go there. So they sent me there, and I was getting my master's degree. And so I had a cheap studio. It was like $1,200 a month. I got a studio, and I got to run this program. And that's kind of when I realized, it was for me, I'm a massive introvert, but I got to run this studio, this visiting artist program. So they were like, Kathleen, you have to invite these artists to come. And I'm like, what do I do? And they're like, just call them up or email them. And I was like, really? They were like, yeah. And it was really that simple. Like, you send a nice email. I'm a big fan of your work. Would you like to come? And and everyone was so nice. And I was like, oh, like that's what.
It was that. It was only until I tried. Like sometimes we feel like, oh, I don't know how this will happen. It's so hard, and a lot of times it's our own fear of rejection, that we don't put ourselves out there. But once we do, and we figure out the way, like even before, just let's say for example, starting a podcast, I was like, oh, I don't know how will I be able to get guests, and now we're fourth season. We've had Ashley Longshore, we've had Daniel, we've had some incredible gallerists from India, from the US, all. And I was like, I don't even know if these people will be ever willing to come in. And it was only I realized that if I'm not willing to ask, I will never know. And a lot of them did turn up.
Yeah, and so that was like such a huge moment for me. I mean, it's just everyone, they're just people, and they want friends, and they want to be know nice people. So if you're just yourself and nice and honest, that's all you have to be, and it worked. And the more comfortable you are in your own skin, the better you're going to do.
So let's say if I were to ask you what is specifically in that time, what would be if you were to attribute three things that you were doing right that brought you to a, let's say, anyone who's actively looking for a gallery representation? What would that be for you? Let's say it worked for you then. Then we'll figure out if they're working today or not.
So you have to be willing to network. You have to be talking to people and meeting other artists. You have to be looking at other people's art and hanging out with other artists. Yes. Number two, you have to have good work. You have to have good work, and you have to be constantly working. Like, it's just, you need to be out there. You need to be, I've never stopped taking classes ever. So you need to be out there and working and learning and, getting feedback and just, I mean, I love all that. So I think that's part of it, is that you just have to have good work and keep pushing yourself.
And the third?
Third is, I think you just have to be yourself and be humble. Know who you are, know your value system.
Let's now come back in the present. Okay, now let's see, what does it mean for you to be an artist today? How do you feel it's different from the time you never had even a cell phone versus today? What is the fundamental difference you feel as being in both the places, taking a break and then restarting?
I think you have more control. I think artists have more power. Yes, yes.
How do you say that?
That we have, just like you, that we have the ability to get together and create our own platforms. Like, you created this platform. How fantastic and awesome is that? And you are elevating other people. And there have been studies in female leadership. And the part of female leadership is that we lift each other up. And, there's top down leadership, but females don't do that. We lift each other up. You created a platform, and I'm so honored to be here. I've been listening for 4 years. You're raising everybody up. And that's what's great. And that energy is out there. And that's what we can do for each other. We make each other better. We're not in competition. We raise each other up. And I think that's what's different. That energy is just fantastic. And that's what's different.
What do you feel has, like, personally, if I were to place you, if you were to choose to one way, would it be the world that you before you came from, like, where we had no internet access, it was more in person, all of those things, or to grow your career, or the one that we're in today?
Absolutely the one that we're in today, but I would say that in person matters. Like, it matters,
Yes, absolutely.
that putting that FaceTime in matters. Showing up at your friend's opening, that matters. Putting, if you can, just take it, sending that email, even if you can't, send an email. Like, just support, like, cheer your people on. Like, that's nice. Just that's different. That energy is just out there, and we have so much more control over our careers now.
How is, as an artist, it has impacted you? If I were to ask, specifically ask creating work, has your work, what kind of work were you making in the early years?
Very similar. I mean, I've been obsessed with crowds and how people gather for 20 years, and it's still the same thing. I just can't. It fascinates me how, even what we're talking about, how we all lift each other up and how we work together, and how coming together as a community and celebrating what we have in common is better for everybody. And that's just what fascinates me.
And how do you feel, like, specifically with, like, social media now, like, I'm speaking to you, we're both, I have a community, I'm still sitting in this room all by myself. Like, I have a team, but I'm still sitting in this room all by myself. Like, there's also this, how do I say this, I have people, but I'm also alone in that sense. Like, I don't know if it's, I'm saying if it's a privilege or not, I really don't know. But how does, I'm trying to, someone who's also, do you look at crowds like that also? Because today social media is also very crowded, there's so many opinions, so much noise, so much information. um, as an artist, constantly taking this information, being exposed to a lot of, successes, and, like, in older times, I think in 15 years before, I wouldn't know what actually is happening in New York. And a lot of people, unless I'm absolutely there, or how many of us would actually know, not all. But with technology today, a lot of things have changed and evolved, and I have friends all over the world, and I can choose to go down that path, but also know that maybe, I'm I think what I'm trying to ask is, maybe how creatively this overexposure impacts us as artists.
I'm going to answer that slightly differently than how you asked. Everything has a good and bad, right? The world is in balance. So I think that when you have the internet, there's always going to be a bad side to it. Just like when world before cell phones, there was a bad side to it. I mean, there were times when you're waiting on the road 45 minutes, like, oh my, I've been here 45 minutes. Is this person like, I mean, we would sit there literally and wait for 45 minutes. You don't know where the person is. You don't know if they're coming. You don't know if they're
Imagine happening that today.
that doesn't happen anymore. So so we have to look at, like, there's a good and bad to everything, right? So we can sit there and say that one of the great things on social media is that you have built a community. So people who are interested in, I watched a TV show on this years ago. It was guys who were interested and obsessed with washing machines, and they collect washing machines. They've now all found each other, and they have a community of people that are into washing machines. That's awesome. So yeah, there are bad things on the internet, but there's also these people that found that were alone in their little hobby, and now they found other people and they have a platform for washing machine lovers. So I think you can look at it like anything. You can over exercise. You can do, you know, that's that's knowing who you are and knowing your value system and living a healthy life. And for part of me, it's knowing that I think my responsibility as my job as an artist is to know what's out there, and I need to be educated. And so that's what I'm doing, and I can see shows, I can see more artwork, I can see, yeah, I think it's great. Are there problems with it? Yes.
What was difficult that point and now as an artist? What do you feel is the most difficult thing for you as an artist now?
Well, it kind of changes every day on my mood. Let's see. The most difficult thing for an artist now.
Let's list a few.
Oh, that's such a loaded question. Okay. I think for me now, a lot of it is time management. I think I'm really blessed that I work with some great mentors that I have to go to that I didn't have in the past. I think I've gotten, the older I get, the more comfortable I get with being brutally honest about my own struggles and getting help for them. I think I get more vulnerable the older I get. And I think that's important. I think that's important. So I think the biggest struggle today is really, for me, it's there's a lot to do. Artists do a lot more. We're our marketing managers, we're running the studio, we're doing, most of us are small businesses. So we're doing our taxes, we're doing our marketing, we're doing our budgets, we're doing our plan. We're also talking all the back and forth with various dealers, making sure all of our deadlines, and getting our work in. And then you also have to eat healthy and work out and do all the other things, hopefully, like be a human, right? A healthy human. There's a lot. It's a lot. So I think that's my biggest struggle, is finding that balance. And maybe it's accepting that there isn't a balance. I kind of like to think of it like a boat, and you're never going to be centered, and you just need guardrails. So when the boat's on this side, you're not falling too far off, and you put a guardrail on the other side, and you're just never going to be gone. And there are going to be times.
I think a lot of skill sets that are required by artists today have really gone up. Like we expect we have to be good at we have to be good at content creation, and even I'm not even saying in the sense of we have to make reels or all of those things. Content creation does not only mean complicated videos, but also understanding of platforms, of how these platforms are working, what work should I put out there, what should I don't put out there. Then also extra work, like a lot of things that like that just are today. It's just given that if you're an artist, you have to be on social media. There's no escape from it. You have to have a website. It is a mandate. And not only website, I am guilty of this too, but also a website that's regularly active. I think it's extremely, extremely important. Then having taxes, you can't evade, or like I will figure it out later. No can do. Running like a business also, like I'm grateful for a lot of help I have because of my partner, in the sense of or running other businesses where I have already, before I started this, I knew, and I also failed at a few businesses before. But managing logistics, shipping, international shipping, like there's so much that now we need to constantly update and work on ourselves, that sometimes I feel like not everybody is able to cope up with it, because traditionally artists were not never doing all of this. It was somebody else who was doing, like if you have if there's an artist who's traditionally, let's say, successful, there was a gallery who was doing all of those things. But because social media came in, it opened those doorways. Now anybody could do it. Now you, if you're willing to create your own team, do your own marketing, do your own logistics, sales, taxing, all of those things, you are as good as a gallery could do for you, or run a business for yourself.
Correct? So it's a lot.
Okay. What are you working on? Yeah, you're saying something. It's a lot, for sure.
I've tried some things and had them fail miserably. So you just I tried to do, at one point, I did have my website doing sales, and it just years ago, and it just nope, it just was a complete failure. Like, I couldn't figure out the taxes, I couldn't figure out the shipping by s it was I'm like, "Yeah, this is too complicated." So, you try things, and, that was when I took time off away from the galleries and was painting at home with the kids, and I
Are you working with galleries today?
I am.
What do you find it easier? What we I think there's no right and wrong way to work. We all have our own preferences, specifically our time and space we are willing to give to all of those things. Do you find it easier to work with galleries versus of making your own ecosystem and being a more self-represented artist?
Well, I work with some nonprofit galleries, and I also work with some for-profit galleries. So I'm a member of a nonprofit gallery, and I absolutely love that. I mean, we're a team and we do everything. So I'm in control of all of that, and that's pretty awesome. And then we get to have shows, and just like you're doing, we create platforms for other artists. I just curated a group show there, and I truly believe in the Kool-Aid I paint. I paint community, and I believe in community, and just like you, right? You're building a community. It's fantastic. So I'm honored that I have that, and I'm also honored to have galleries that support me and help show my work to even a broader market. It's all good. It's not competition. It's not either or. I think it all can fit together, and we're a community. We help each other. So it's about that. It's about art is hope, right? At the core, art is hope. And art reminds people that there's awe and beauty in the world. And my art is reminds people that we need each other, and there's value in slowing down, and there's value in those relationships, and there's value in taking a lot of time to just look at one thing and make a painting of it. That time is value, and art is needed. And if you once you understand that it's not a competition, it's all great, and we can all help each other, and there's a market for everybody. It's just such a cool thing that we get to do, right? Like, how lucky are we? Like, we all loved this in kindergarten. Like, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't like to go in our studio every day, right? I mean, at the core of it's that we love this. Like, we just love it. And we get to share that with other people and remind them on a daily basis that there's value in taking that time.
I know. But do you feel anything different when you were making art while not pushing it out there? Did you feel anything different about it all these years while you were making?
I mean, I think at that time, I think the bulk of my brain, I have 3 children, so the bulk of my brain was kind of trying to manage them and get them, they came first, and getting them, that just took the bulk of my processing space. So in terms of my painting, I didn't have all that.
But also creating without pressure or purpose.
I mean, I learned a lot. Like, I mean, literally for 2 years, I said, "I'm only gonna paint with a palette knife." And I only painted with a palette knife for 2 years. And now I can bang out, like, it's funny, I had artists, like, they've gone to academies, they come up to me and they're like, "How are you using a palette knife like that?" And it's like, "Yeah, I only painted with a palette knife for 2 years." Like, I mean, I, like, made a lot of really bad paintings, but that's part of the joy, is that you had that 1 year, and then I
It's also self-discovery. This is something I've been discovering. I have this whole file, like I just brought it to the studio recently. I have a few more there. And my life's been crazy. And I have not been actively putting my work out there specifically for selling and all of that. And I'm okay with that to a point, but now I intend to change that. I intend to put my work out there, have more shows. But I also know I have too much on my plate that I have to prioritize where I am at that moment. But I also love art. I love making art. And maybe if I'm not able to commit to a 9 hour, 6 hour, or 7 hour studio day, I still wanted to commit to making art without anything. And I still do. All the time that I'm not intending to put myself out there, I'm still making art. And this, I shared a reel about this the other day, which connected to a lot of people. And I was like, I have not felt so much content in so many things for the past few years, specifically to my art, that I felt when you. So I what I did basically was I pulled out a table and chair and put it in my room. I used to work on a laptop before on that, and I removed my desktop laptop, and it was like this painting. This table is only when I draw and paint, and I removed the stress of good, bad, recording, not recording, sharing Instagram. No, I just wanted to commit an hour or so in the morning, an hour or two in the evening or before bed, and at least make sure that I show up on this table at least once a day, if anything at all. And I also blended spirituality with it, because I also wanted to dedicate 1 hour to spirituality, to taking God's name and everything. So I was like, I will paint here and I will do something, and it'll also be how I remember God with it. And I had no intention, and I still don't have intent, but I felt heavy in the beginning. But as I started to lift off that pressure, I was so happy to feel that the work that I was making, I didn't care how bad or good was, it was only getting better, in the sense of how I was able to connect to myself, but also how small consistency, creating without pressure in that sense, can also give so much creative freedom, so much grace, so much welcome to new ideas. Sometimes we get restricted. Oh, I have to, like, I have this diary here which I have my series listed, and these are the projects I have to work. And I was like, I don't know where this has come from. I never had this. I had no intention, but here it is. Because also, like, I just feel like how you have to be so open to some things when it comes to creativity, like not creating for anything but for yourself, and be okay with that.
I think what you're talking about, you said grace, and I think that's what it's about. And it's about grace, and it's also about self-care, right? I mean, why can't we say, I need that time with myself to make work for me? And that's my self care. And I deserve that. And I deserve that time to play. It doesn't have to be for any other reason. I hired a babysitter and would go out, and I joined a plein air group. And that forced me to have 4 hours to just go out and sit in the woods and make work. And that's good. That was my self-care. That was my time. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough, that that's okay. And you don't have to have your work out there. And that's the most important. That goes back to that play, the reason why we love this. That's our self-care. And that needs to have a bigger platform.
What last question? Last. If you were to give yourself an advice to two versions of yourself, the one that was 15 years ago in that world and the one that's here, right here, what would you tell yourself?
If I could go back, I would tell myself 15 years ago, I was beating myself up. Like the day that my gallery mailed me all the paintings from their storage room, I was like, oh my God, my career is over. And I had that, there was a myth of like, oh, now that you have kids, it's like you have to be the mommy track or the artist track. And that's just a myth. If I could go back, I'd say, oh, that's a bunch of BS. That one of the best things I ever did was taking all of that time to just make work for myself. I mean, I just occasionally people knew that people would come and they knew that I was painting, and I would get commissions during that time. Here's the thing I didn't give myself credit for. I ended up making a business during that time because people would find out that I painted, and they'd be like, oh, can you do a portrait? Can you do a house? Like, so I ended up doing these like home portraits and portrait and a lot of commissions. And during that time, I realized, oh, this is how you make it. Oh, that was a problem. I can't do that on my next commission. And so I ended up having a fantastic contract by the end of that period. I'm like, oh, I have a great contract. Now I have. So I learned all of that without putting any pressure on myself to do it, and really just having fun. And one year I painted with a limited palette. Like it was, okay, you're only going to use 3 colors. Then I expanded to 6 colors and split color palette. I don't know how to do this. I'll go take this workshop and I'll go do. And I literally just no pressure, but I actually was making money at the time and built a whole business. So it was kind of this, I don't know, just stumbling around, I figured out what worked for me and set my parameters, and I decided I moved out west, and I decided early on, I realized that a lot of, moving out west and experiencing that culture and realizing that a lot of what you hear in the New York art world is a complete myth, and there are many different paths.
Why do you say so?
That's all I had ever heard, and once I moved out west and heard artists that had won NEA grants and that are in international museum collections, and they've never had a show in New York, but they're these giants in the art industry, right? So once you see that, you're like, "Wow, okay, there are a lot of different ways to do this," and I think that was my big shift, and it was also like, I can that's what I'm gonna do. This is who I am. These are the values I was raised with. I'm going to be like this and this is how I'm going to work. And that's just sort of how I went out about it. Like I want to work with people I like. I want to make work that I like. I love what I do and I want to work with other people that love what they do.
I think this is such a wonderful reminder. I think it's a reminder we need to constantly. I think I completely go by this for sure.
Right. Like if it just, there's a vibe to it, right? Like it's got to feel good.
Yeah, if I heard this on Jenna's. I don't know if you know Jenna Kucha, um, her podcast, and I really liked it. She's like, I keep reminding myself that there's a better way to do this. I can do this with love. Whatever I do, I want to do with love because I otherwise I'm going to get up tomorrow and feel like, and there will be days that I do a lot of things that I hate today in the sense of no, I don't like doing taxes. No, I don't like doing a lot of things that I have to do when I'm running a business. But I love the books we create. I love talking to people. I love supporting this community. I love the outcomes of it. So I get through the hard some days. Like some days I'm like, maybe I'll take a break from this. And like ultimately I know I find the joy in, if not the direct form, but some indirect form. But if I feel like, oh, why do I have to talk to these people? Why I have to do that? Now I have to do this. And I've been there where I've done something that I really didn't enjoy and it was terrible. Like I didn't feel good about it, no matter how the work did or not. So it's so important.
Yeah, I look at it I used to be a running coach, so I look at it like that. So it's if you wanna run a marathon, you have to get out there and train, and you don't do that many long runs. You mostly do a lot of 3-mile runs, and there are a lot of days you don't wanna get out and run, but you have to but that consistency and showing up, and that's what builds your endurance, and that's what builds showing up at the same time every day at the same park, you meet a community and you meet your support system and you get that's what it is. It's those little increments, 1% improvement a day, just show up for yourself and give yourself that time, and it's that consistency and that practice.
What I'm actually hooked on these smaller studies. I don't know, intuitive, whatever. I really am more than anything in the studio. I'm so much more excited about the time, like I said, about mixing my spirituality with my studio, sitting in my room on the table before bed in the morning, and I'm in that phase. Like I'm just so much enjoying that, and I'm okay not like I'm making on smaller these, and a lot of these work has suddenly come from a lot of temples that I've been visiting in India, a lot of mythology that I've been reading about. So I'm like, I like that cocoon this time. Before I put myself out there and go get in the studio, I'm really liking this time right now. What about you?
Let's see. I'm starting a new body of work, and I think it's going to be. I've been looking at. I live on the Jersey Shore, so how people come together down here, and what it's like. Just the sea of humanity that was here on Labor Day. We just had the holiday weekend here, so I went down and just was watching everyone meet up at the beach and looking at how that's been captured throughout art history and what you can do on that to kind of it's a little bit of a trope, right? So is there a way that you can kind of flip that and make it contemporary? So that's kind of what's been having my jam lately. But I'm playing a lot in my sketchbook and looking at all of that stuff and excited to see what comes of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kathleen. It was so nice speaking to you. Where can people find you, support you, and support your work?
Um, so you can go onto my website, KathleenBeausoleil.com. You can go onto Instagram, like always. I work with Garvey Simon in New York, the Painting Center, and Gallery Lucida.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Go get some time for yourself.